Welcome to episode 2. Sam the man, Chief Baker, CEO
Yeah.
of Grizzly Foods, Grizzly Baked Goods.
Chief Baker might not be the case anymore, but we've been all the roles, haven't we?
You have. So it's great to have you here today. And I think because it was March, actually, I was driving on the way to work this morning and I was thinking, the question on everyone's mind is, what do you do with all the excess feijoas?
The excess feijoas, what do you mean?
It's May.
Well...
Feijoa trees in New Zealand are just overflowing with goodness. But what do you do with them all?
Well, we are currently making a donut with a feijoa curd inside and a nice custard to go with it. I hear it's great. I don't like feijoas.
You don't?
No.
I can't believe this.
Yeah, so they're not for me, but have at it, you know?
Yeah. Okay. Well, they are a controversial fruit.
Yeah, for sure.
But I just thought you would have been into them.
No, but I hear reports that the donut's selling very well. People are loving it.
Okay.
It's just not.
So send them to you. Like, how many feijoas do you need?
We're good.
You're
good.
good.
We're good. We've got a tree heaving in the backyard as well. So, they're a little bit smaller this year.
Okay. Yeah, they are.
Small
Ours
size.
are small too.
A bit fiddly, but there are ways to use them. I guess just don't ask me because
you don't like them.
Yeah, I'll just have them over the fence, you know.
Yeah. A 16-year-old me would have had a different answer to that question than perhaps current me.
Right. Yeah.
Anywho, so yeah, you have been on a bit of a journey with the business, and I thought to start at the present moment before we go back a bit. But you're currently switched roles with Sara.
Yes.
Who's your wife and co-founder.
Yep.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, so as of the start of March, we sort of switched from being the stay-at-home parent, that was Sara, and now that's me. So I'm spend sort of Thursday and Friday plus a weekend with the youngest of the 4. All the others are at school now, but enjoying that, enjoying the home life, enjoying the honestly the relatively predictable routine of keeping a house together versus the sometimes less predictable routine of running a business. Yeah. Wake up, put some washing on, put some dishes on, let's go.
Yeah, I can somewhat relate to that. I think there is definitely a sense of unpredictability in our family life as well, which gives me the heebie-jeebies sometimes. But I'm curious about how that conversation started, because it's not the norm, certainly, firstly for owners, also societally. How did that conversation kind of come about?
I think it's sort of, it's an interesting question. We just opened another retail site in the start of March, and that's when the switch formally took place. So Sara manages that shop, and I think it was around October, November last year that she kind of pitched the idea of managing it. And I thought that sounded great. Of course, what that would mean is that one of us has to stay home. And I love my kids. I love hanging out with them. So it kind of just happened real quick, and it just made sense. So take a bit of a step back from the day-to-day, but obviously still very involved with the business, especially in a strategic sense. So my week is still very condensed. I'm at work Monday through Wednesday when I'm not recording podcasts. And Sara's at work Monday through Friday. And yeah, it was just kind of a fairly straightforward switch. Always been fairly involved in the house anyway, hopefully. Sara would agree with that. And so it's not too much of an upheaval for us. We do generally kind of split things anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just I think often in the classic scenario in business is where the male has a technical skill set, starts a business based off of that skill set, and then the wife gets left behind. And so it's interesting that you guys have kind of very much, and since the start, to be fair as well, like you said, very much been in it together, and then come full circle back to that arrangement that you've got now. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's going all right. Yeah, we're a month and a bit into it, but yeah, I you're right. Like that is the common pattern, and I think we've worked really hard to get to this point. And yeah, just if anything, it means that my time working in the business needs to be a lot more focused. So it really comes down to like moments with people. You know, if someone wants to book in a catch up about anything, I know that we really have to make progress in that time and make sure that that person gets something out of it, because we don't have all the time in the world.
Yeah.
So being more direct and having the focus be around like, what can I do with my time that helps this person in this moment?
That's gold. I could dig into that, but I'm going to go back a step.
Sure.
Because you said, you know, it's been a journey to get here. So just for people who don't know, tell the audience about how many stores you've got right now, where they are, and that journey from doing bagels originally at the farmers market through to now.
Yeah. Oh, and I'll try not to make it too sobering.
It's okay. Sobering's fine.
Yeah. So currently we are a split between a wholesale and a retail business, about 40-60. We have 3 retail shops, one on Cashel Street, one on Wells Street, and one on Buchan Street. We also do the Christchurch Farmers Market at Rickett and Bush every Saturday, where we've been doing that for 10 and a half years. That's where we started. That was the 23rd of November 2013. I rocked up to that market with a couple of repurposed beer crates and filled them up with fresh bagels and kind of went for it. So
Why bagels originally?
Why bagels? Well, it was something that Sara and I had travelled through North America in sort of 2009, 2010. And this is sort of like pre me actually starting to bake. I hadn't yet worked in the baking industry. And they were a baked good that was just like so specifically interesting in terms of their process and the way that the texture can kind of it's just so different with a bagel, where you've got that chew and that little bit of crust, and but it can still be really soft. It's just an interesting thing, and I think it's a really interesting product to like shape as well. Very unique methods in terms of making them. So it's kind of a bit of an odd one for sure. But when I'm originally from Christchurch, but after the February earthquakes, 2011, we kind of shifted. Next day we went up to the Waikato and we lived in Hamilton. And I worked at a bakery there for a few years. And then when we were thinking about coming back, we'd been down to Christchurch for a family event, and we went to the farmers market at Dean's Bush, and I saw all these storeholders sort of like making some things were like very specific, very niche. You know, at that time, like there was posh porridge, there was cakes by Anna, there was the Bacon Bros were there, and I was like, oh, this is cool. Like people can kind of like, there's enough people coming to this market, enough customers that you can really be focused on just making one thing really, really well. So that was the idea, and that was probably 9 months before we rocked up to that first market. And I kind of just had that idea to do bagels, like on the spot kind of thing. I thought it filled a gap, especially post-Quake. I know there are a couple of places like Yellow Rocket and Daily Bagel that existed pre-Quake that didn't anymore. So it was sort of an opportunity to bring something back into the local market. That's why bagels, for sure.
And so now, having evolved into multi-site, multi-channel in terms of the retail and wholesale, if you rewind back to those early days in the market, is that what you foresaw in your mind?
I'd categorically say no.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. That first market we're talking about, I think I probably used like half a bag of flour, so like 10 kgs of flour, and made some bagels and turned up. It was very much that thing of I was a good technician and was in denial for a number of years about the fact that I'd started a business.
Mm-hmm.
So to go from 10 kgs of flour a week to now we're up to, I think we're probably at about 3 tons of flour a week.
Mental.
No, I didn't foresee that, and it wasn't. I don't think there was really much of a plan at the start. It was turn up, make sure that what we're making is like the best of what we can do. Make sure it's the best in class kind of thing. And then see where it goes. It's important to note that for that first 18 months, this was very much a part-time idea. It was 2.5 days a week in terms of prep and then selling that Grizzly was of my time. That was the last time that I was actually also the stay-at-home parent. So when we started, Sara was studying at Canterbury and I was, a parent and then part-time bagel guy. So, it's gone in such interesting directions, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you this is what we'd planned from day one.
Yeah, I always find that interesting because I think the assumption is that every entrepreneur, every founder, every owner has this dream in mind, and it's just a matter of working out the steps to achieve that dream. But actually, I think there's a lot of accidental entrepreneurs, accidental owners that just found themselves in this position, and then as the business evolves and grows, it turns into a bigger beast, or sometimes not. But it's I want to come back to the best in class thing because I think that's something that really separates you from your competitors and also separates the good businesses from the great. So I want to come back to that, but the journey up and scaling up from kind of marketplace to first store, obviously Buchan Street. How did that come about?
Yeah,
what was that like?
That was both like the longest 4.5 years of my life and also the fastest. So we start at the market 2013. For 18 months there, that's pretty much all we were doing is just the market, and then some events as well around that. Like people would, obviously come to the market like what we did. Hey, do you want to go to a nighttime market or first Thursdays down in Sydenham or whatever it was at the time? And you started to like meet people and met a few chefs around town, and it was like May, it was probably about this time, May 2015, where there had been enough sort of people asking would I make bread wholesale for them that it kind of was inevitable that it would turn over into that type of business as well. Because alongside the market, I also had a secret Facebook group where people would order bread from me.
Right.
And it was just friends and family. So
Yeah.
I was still making bread every Friday just for a few people, just to kind of try out some new things, do some like weird little products and stuff like that. And then a few people had like caught on that I could make other stuff than just bagels. So then in mid 2015 we entered this kind of funny phase where we went all in doing wholesale. So when we started doing wholesale, we went 6 days a week, and then on the 7th day was the market. So Sara and I were working 7 days a week, and at that point we had 2 little kids. But yeah, so from May 2015 through to the end of 2016, like right at the start of 2017, really, it was just us. And I think we had added on a couple of things at the market, like donuts, and we were doing sandwiches at the market as well. But most people had no idea that the other 6 days of the week we were sending bread to, it was probably 8 to 10 places around Christchurch. And even that was like very word of mouth. We were very picky about who we were going to work with. So it was very much like very personal relationships with certain people. Guys like Sam Stewart and Chris Penny from Hello Sunday, they were kind of the real push in the back to get going with wholesale. I had come from a bakery that was very much a wholesale bakery, so I probably thought I knew more than I really did about how to do wholesale operation. But that's what we started doing. So we'd deliver around the city 6 days a week. The 7th day was the market, and then we just keep going. So we did that. We did a lot of hours for 18 months, and honestly, I couldn't tell you why we worked ourselves that hard. Just I think we were stuck at that precipice of like not quite being busy enough to bring someone on board and afford to pay someone, but being too busy to go out and look for more business. So stuck at this really annoying spot where it's like working, 100 hours a week, and that's 2.5 people's jobs right there, but not having the wherewithal to do anything about it. So that was a pretty full-on 18 months.
What flipped the switch for that first hire?
What flipped the switch? I think, honestly, enough people just being like, probably just watching me like, slowly perish on the tools, just a human desiccating away, that it was like, oh yeah, we've got to do something about it. So it was 1 and then 2 people, and then there were some people doing the market for us as well. That was actually a huge change when we brought on a couple of people who were really awesome to man our market stall. And then, from there, it was obvious that, once you got one person, there's not quite enough work. You've got to get more work. But then you get too much work, so you need another person, and then on for the last 7 years.
Yeah, and I think that every stage of business has that, right? Like you get to this point and you go, well, we're not quite busy enough to have X position, and you could just put insert position here, right? But every level of the business has that. It's just the first one feels like a huge deal. The first hire is because your costs are going up by at least 50%. And so that's an interesting position, but I think it's a question that particularly in the smaller phases or earlier stages of business that people wrestle with is like, do I have enough work for the staff member or not? How have you navigated that through the different stages?
I think that's really challenging, and in our industry with the type of product we make, it's we don't have like a work in progress. Everything has to be freshly made. We're now 7 days a week. We're 361 days a year. There's no work in progress. So what someone orders for tomorrow, we have to make today, and there's no way around that. I know that there's other types of manufacturing where there's a 4-week lead time for a job or whatever. If Gary's sick for a week, maybe you can push that expectancy out or whatever it is. You probably have some leeway built in. We don't have leeway. It just has to be done. And I think that probably leads to us running a little, sometimes lean on people, because the growth can come before we're ready. But then sometimes we're a bit fat on it, because we're always at the whim of the wholesale customers' seasonality. And we definitely have the seasons of the year do change buying habits and quantities, and even down to SKUs change throughout the year. So the ins and outs of that has been tricky, coupled with the fact that for the last 5 years we've grown 30-35% every single year.
Yeah. So
that's revenue, but obviously that's people as well. So it's been a lot, and trying to keep on top of that labour component is a really tricky one, because we don't want to have a situation where people are getting burned out, and we also don't have the luxury of having days where people can just sit around and do nothing. So we're always busy. It's just making sure we're not too busy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's such a delicate balance, isn't it? Because on the one hand, yes, you can save reduce wage costs by not having that extra labour, but on the other hand, it limits your ability to grow.
Yeah. And
I think as a general rule, if you can afford half the salary or the wage, and you've got enough work, there's at least 50% of their job is there, they'll find the other 50%. You'll find stuff for them to do, which will turn into profit for you. But it's always a delicate balance, like you said, and that it can depend on, like you said, the workload of the team, the forward work, but also your financial position as well. And sometimes you just have to take the risk.
Yeah, and for sure. And I think where we're at now is we're more confident about taking that risk.
Yeah.
And going out and recruiting and bringing people on, training them, and then having them ready for when the growth's coming.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's been times where we've recruited and hired someone, and they go into a team, and then you hear from existing team members like, "Why did we hire this person? We're not busy enough." And it's like 2 weeks later, and everyone's just like run off their feet.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's just linking up what's coming with where we're at right now.
Yeah.
That's kind of the challenge.
Yeah, and I think that question is always what's not being done. Like, you can always see the potential for work for them in terms of just what's there right now. But usually if you're understaffed, there's a whole bunch of things that aren't being done, or they aren't being done to the standard that they should be being done.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's also, you see the tip of the iceberg, right? I just wanted to dig into what you said before around the working 100 hours a week, and that, other people could see you kind of whittling away. Because I think that's a real, particularly now with Instagram and the like, where you see snippets of the successes, but you don't see the grind. I think there's a tendency for owners to get allured by the riches, but not necessarily see the path is through. And not that all the struggle is always necessary, but if you want to do anything in life that's meaningful, it generally involves some kind of struggle. And so I just wanted to dig into that in terms of what those struggle points for you have been in terms of the getting from, as you said, from one staff to hiring that first staff member, but also at different stages of the business where those real niggly stages have been.
Yeah, I mean, I think that working 100 hours a week is a result of poor planning.
Not recommended.
Yeah, not recommended. Don't do it. But it was one of those things where like I probably told myself I didn't have a choice. And certainly with, a couple of kids, it's not like you could stop. But it clearly wasn't well planned, because that's not a good result for anyone.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an interesting one, because I think sometimes I feel like, you say to people that, oh yeah, I did those hours, and it feels like a badge of honour. But I don't think it should be.
No.
I'm proud of getting through it. I'm not proud of working like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it was stupid.
Unsustainable.
Yeah, completely. There were a couple of times over that period where I, basically collapsed from exhaustion and just like slept for like 12 hours. And then what I do? I got up and I went back to the bakery.
Went and did it again.
Yeah, I went and did it again because I had to. But there would, obviously now in hindsight, there are other ways around it because it's completely unsustainable. In terms of that graft and grind of what you're talking about with like social media, I certainly don't think what you see there any amount of the time is true, at least in, I wouldn't say what anyone's saying on there is 100% true. It's just clout from my perspective. But yeah, I mean, the grind is, when you're in those modes, it's hard and it's not recommended. But the way around it is to plan to not do that. But that's a whole nother thing.
That's a whole nother conversation, yeah. Yeah, and I think it's also like, even with the planning, there's still, you can't plan your way around the need to make some of those hard calls. It's like the same thing with starting the business. People go, oh, well, if I knew the income was there, well, I'd just start the business.
Yeah.
But you don't. That's the whole point. If I just knew the work was there for that first hire or the 10th hire, but you never do.
For sure.
So it's
and even like not knowing what we should be doing in terms of like products and services. We're doing them, and in totality they're bringing in revenue. But what of these things should we just not be doing at all? And at the start, when it's just you and you're going for it, you kind of feel like you've got to do all of it.
Yes.
But again, like, there's also not the time to evaluate that. And yeah, as you say, you kind of don't know that the market's there until you're in the market. You can do all the best planning, but you've still got to get that customer through the door.
Yeah, the tyranny of urgency, right? Like, when you're in the thick of it, the things that would be most effective for you are often the hardest to do, like stepping back, stopping, and actually extracting yourself from the business, even just for an hour, to organize your thinking and make a plan and then go about executing it. It's really hard to do that when you are in the thick of it, and like you said, it feels like you don't have a choice. It doesn't feel like a need. It feels like you have to do this.
Yeah.
When those customers are calling you and the phone's ringing, you have to answer it.
Yeah.
Even though it's always a choice.
Yeah.
It feels like there's no other option. And that's really, that's tough. And I think, but the stage you're at now in terms of being able to be more, you do have more time to be able to do that, then means you can exponentially grow the business beyond what you could back at those early stages.
Yeah, so we're talking, we're now at we've got 65 people on payroll. They're not all full time, but we've got a few part timers there and working the market and stuff like that. But to go from 2 people to 3, 4, I think the biggest leap for us was when we opened our Wells Street shop. We went from 10 people to 20 basically overnight, and that was one of the hardest times.
Yeah, what was that like?
Yeah, that was difficult. That was 2019. We opened first week in November, and so we'd planned for the impact of both needing front of house people to run the shop, and then also lining it up with what the impact on back of house production would be. So it was quite a few hires all at once. And I think the biggest thing that happened was, when we went from like 10 people and it was Sara and myself, and we had that kind of like perfect amount of people within the business that we were, I suppose, managing, sort of only managing 5 or 6 people each. So it's kind of like the sweet spot. And then when you go to 20, but you haven't necessarily made those organisational changes to suit that size, we were just like, well, we were having difficulty with our time, really. It might be strange to say it was difficult because we probably worked really hard to make sure we were the only ones finding it difficult. And hopefully the team kind of didn't know. But also maybe that's the wrong thing to say, because sometimes it is helpful when other people know.
Yeah, sure.
And then that went right into COVID. We were open for 3.5 months and then COVID.
Boom.
Yeah.
And COVID actually, ironically, had a positive impact on your business in the sense of you're able to trade through and create some stickiness with the brand and some delivery systems.
We stopped for the 5 weeks.
Yeah.
So during the full level 4 lockdown, we stopped for 5 weeks, and I'll be honest, it was incredible. Just being at home for 5 weeks, kind of, thinking about work, obviously, but really that was a time to plan what we're going to do next. So yeah, then as you say, once it opened back up into level 3, we had a plan to do the home delivery kind of thing and put together a website, which would put together just before COVID to start doing home deliveries, because we were predicting COVID was going to impact as it did.
Buying habits.
And yeah, we put that together and we started delivering, and that went crazy. That was like, well beyond our expectations through that kind of mid part of 2020. And yeah, we were off to the races. Like, we actually were way busier than we expected. And it was great to see that many people still wanted to get the goods. But yeah, it was really interesting. Like, we came out of it with so much uncertainty, and I think the main thing for us was we just decided to be positive and at times like aggressive with what we were doing, and just like, in 2020 we bought the most expensive bit of plant equipment we ever have, and that might seem like a weird time to do that, but we decided to kind of ramp up because we were at an awkward size. That size we were of, sort of the low 20s of people, was, it was very awkward in terms of where Sara and I were stretched to as well. Sara had stepped back away because we had another child in 2019, so she would stay at home again. And so we just didn't have the structure in place to make it work at that size, and we kind of knew as soon as we opened that welder shop on Wells Street, we knew that we were at the wrong size and we had to keep going, which is a kind of a strange thing to say, but we knew that 20 people was not enough to build the right structures, and we kind of realised it was going to be about 35 to 40 people. So that took us another probably 18 months to get there, which kind of sets us into the structure we're in now. Obviously it's expanded more in people, but from an organisational structure, what we kind of planned for out of 2020 is what we were at now. Yeah.
I think it's really critical as well to understand where those points are for your business, because it is different for every business, but there are some economies of scale that come at different, and also some different challenges. Not everyone wants those challenges, so I think it is important to understand what you want in the first place, what you want the business to look like, and then secondly, understand what are those points that actually, like you said, there's some death zones and at a couple of different headcounts depending on the business, and if you're not aware of that, then you can actually, your profit can take a pretty big hit, and or your lifestyle, if you just stick at a particular stage for too long. How did you kind of come to that conclusion?
Honestly, it seems a weird answer, but it just didn't feel right. We just knew we weren't getting the right traction. You can see it in the team when people are like frazzled, you know, when you realize you know there's someone that's in the team that could quite happily lead a team or knows the answer to the question that they've got for you, but you haven't given them the responsibility to take it on themselves. And I think when you hear you know, those types of questions come your way, or you see the looks on people's faces or whatever it might be, it's telling, but you've got to also be open to observing that. So we, you know, I certainly felt stretched personally in terms of what I was doing, but you could also see that there were people ready to pick up some of the responsibilities that you had and hungry for it because they like what we do and who we are. So I think it was knowing that that was there and available and those people were there and actually doing something with it.
I think, like you said, you have to be open to seeing that. If you don't want to see the capability and the capacity that your team has, then and your eyes wide shut. Yeah. But it sounds like there was something about you that was open to that. You were looking for that. Yeah. What do you think that was?
I think equal parts it probably is born out of those moments earlier on of being completely exhausted and having an organisation of, you know, just yourself and your wife. You just have to get up and go again, and knowing that that's like not good enough. So you're kind of looking for. I was looking for answers. I was open to anything. I've always been fairly inquisitive and keen to learn and pick up new skills, and I think there was a lot of that, and I think there was a lot of personal growth required, which certainly started when I got the phone call from you, and we started working together in 2019. That was a massive year of personal growth. For those that have worked with you, Marcus, I don't know if they all share the same thing, but it's as much like about therapy.
Yeah, someone called me that the other day. Yeah, business therapist.
Yeah. Well, you know, when you're working with the business owner on themselves, that's what's going to happen, right? Yeah. And it's just looking back at yourself and you're looking inward and trying to find answers that are within you. I think, just being open to what's happening and looking for solutions. Like I'm definitely all about trying to find little ways to improve things all the time, just those little incremental improvements. And so I think I probably had a tendency for that openness anyway. Yeah. Because although like I, you know, would consider myself a very good baker, I also wouldn't think that I know everything. I think that's kind of the second you think you know everything, you're done. Like just forget it, pack it up. Yeah. You're kind of obsolete at that point. So being open to anything, you know, whether it's a new technique of shaping a loaf of bread, or it's a new way to, you know, post a job ad to Trade Me or whatever. Like, just there's always got to be something. You can't assume that the way you're doing it is the right way or the best way. So just being open to that as a concept, really.
Yeah, it just reminds me of my jiu-jitsu coach, Luis. He has this saying, like, a black belt's just a white belt that never gave up. And really, when you get to black belt, you just realize how much you don't know. But I think sometimes and especially with business owners in this country especially, I don't think it's a phenomenon that is as common in other countries. I know talking to other coaches, it's less of a factor in other countries. But in New Zealand, we think that if we have a business that's like profitable, that the learning's kind of stopped, like you've mastered it, you've got the black belt. But I think the fact like that, the curiosity that you maintain, I just wrote down the beginner's mind, like just maintaining that, like whatever it is I'm doing, no matter how good I am at it, there's always little incremental tweaks. Like we were just talking about off camera about pancakes, and you were talking about adding butter to your pancakes. And I was like, yeah, I think the pancakes recipe is pretty good, but little did I know. What was it called? Shortening the gluten. Yeah. That's another podcast that I'm not qualified to host. But yeah, maintaining that beginner's mind, I think, is so critical. And as you said, maintaining that curiosity of like, I haven't reached it, and I never will reach it, whatever it is. And then to look for that in other people and see like, how could these people help me propel this organisation forward is so critical.
And it's also something in our industry with the type of like bread and pastries we make. It's very analogous to the actual process of baking, where you've got you're putting the same ingredients into the mixing bowl every day, but there are all these external factors, temperature, humidity, what person is working that day, what hands are going to be shaping the bread, that you're trying to, I think sometimes you're trying to achieve a perfection that doesn't exist, right? So the great thing about bread is like you can have these expectations of what you want out of it. And if you want it to be an A+ and it falls short, you can be disappointed that you only turned out a B+.
Yeah.
But then you get to go on tomorrow and try and do an A+ again.
Yeah.
And that's the only way you can come back and do that again is if you're open to that self criticism of what made that a B+. Why did we not get an A+ that day?
Yeah.
And then what also happens over time is that an A+ today, that's in 6 months, that's probably only an A-. Your expectations for what you can do change over time if you're looking to maintain those standards.
Yes.
So we talk a lot about, we think one of the best things we do is our consistency of product. Despite all the different people working, all different hands on loaves or croissants, whatever it is, or coffee, that you don't notice who's working. It's all in service of making that consistent product. And we would much rather, hit an even line and then push upwards from there than have some days be like, if you had like
out of this world.
Yeah, the best bread in the world, and then the next day you had something that was crap. I don't want that. Like, let's not do that. Let's make every day the same and then push upwards. And then what you end up with is, best in class product because you're chasing a consistent output.
Interesting. So your philosophy around the bread is more like and it just makes me think of that saying, consistency is a symptom of mastery. Like when you can do anything consistently, you've shown that you can master that particular skill. But if you can't do it consistently, if I can't hit the ball down the fairway 9 times out of 10, if it's one good one, one bad one, 2 good ones, one bad one, I have got no sense of mastery whatsoever. But as you said, if I can do the task to a particular standard and then raise that over time, but still maintaining that consistency, then that's how I'm going to grow.
Yeah.
Sustainably.
Yeah, and it means if you're consistent as well, it's easy to look at where you've been to check as where you are now. Whereas if you're up and down, it's kind of hard to tell what was going on back then. Yeah. But we will change recipes. We just recently changed a baguette recipe quite dramatically because we were only hitting that high sort of 70% of the time.
Interesting.
And we weren't happy with it. So alongside still making that product and trying to get it correct, get it to where it needed to be, we had developed another recipe that we were actually more happy with as a final product, and it was more consistent. And then so when we had that ready, we slipped it in. We never told anyone that. We just change it because that's what we need to do. At the same time, if we have products that we're not happy with, like we had, I think, last week, we had a whole bunch of pastries that no one would have tasted that day. They didn't make it to market because they were, they might have been a B. So we don't want Bs. So they just didn't get sold that day. We'd rather just not have it available for consumption than put something that's ultimately inconsistent into people's hands.
Yeah. I mean, personally, I really relate to that, but I'm just thinking of the person that's watching this being like, we do that occasionally. We put out B, C. Like, who cares? Every so often, what's the big deal, Sam?
Yeah, that's a good question. The way that I'd answer it is that there's always someone who is coming to the shop for the first time, and we don't want anyone's first time to be their last time. So if a person comes to us and they have a product that's just so-so, and it betrays kind of what we are every other day of the week, then why would we risk having that experience for them?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, because you don't want the first time to be the last time.
Yeah, it's hard to do.
Yep.
It's hard to have. It requires people to understand what that quality that we're after is internally.
Yeah,
and then it requires them to have the autonomy to say no, we're not selling this. And there probably are times where stuff slips through and it shouldn't have, but someone's going to catch it somewhere. And if it's made it to the shelf, even if the next week it comes up in a meeting like, hey, what was the deal with those? Like, there's still work to be done there. But that's the goal. The goal is that you don't get any of those ones that we don't want you to have.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of editing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm curious about the best in class thing for two reasons, and maybe two different angles to this question. But because I think that you can have best in class product or service, but not best in class business. So if you think of McDonald's, for example, like best in class for consistency, worst in class for burger, or not worst in class, but it's not the best burger. Like if you compare Black Burger to a McDonald's burger, and I know you're a vegetarian, so you don't have the liberty.
Well, I have had both, and of course, I would say that the reason Black Burger is so good is obviously the bun they use.
Yeah,
happens to be a very good bun.
It happens to be a good bun. Yeah,
yeah.
That was a softball.
Yeah, thank you.
But they don't necessarily. I guess my point is, you might have the best product or service in your class, but you don't necessarily have the best business. I guess at least what I try and do with the clients we work with is try and help them have both. Like, be best in class at what you do, product or service, and have the business reflect that in terms of its financial performance and its ability to provide lifestyle for you. So I'm curious about, first of all, from a product perspective, why is that so important to you, best in class? And then what your recipe for best in class business is as well.
Yeah, well, I would say the former certainly was driving what we were doing for a lot longer than it should have.
Yeah.
The business acumen came a lot later. But I think having that kind of technical proficiency and eye for good product was really what drove me, and that learning that subject and doing it every day, at the coalface, and turning out stuff that I was super happy with, most of the time, and the other times, obviously, you didn't eat it. But I think that's what really, really got me going, is just trying to make the best product possible. And honestly, that did not transfer initially to business or bottom line or anything, you know. But it certainly, for whatever reason, drove my ambition.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, I think, like you said, it's two separate disciplines.
Yeah.
And that's what I think people forget, is like it's a different skill set. Being the best baker in the world does have some crossover with being the best business owner in the world, but it's a different skill set. Totally. And the moment you realise that and you separate the two and go, okay, well, if I was the best business owner in the world, what things would I be doing? What skills would I have? What would I be prioritising with my time, et cetera, et cetera? It changed the game. So I'm curious about that, like because I look at and you're probably too humble to say this, but I'll say it. I look at the industry in Christchurch as far as baked goods goes and think you've got best-in-class product, in my humble opinion, for sure. But I would suggest that you've also got one of the best-in-class, certainly, I don't know other businesses' financial performance, but I'm assuming you would be at the right end of the bell curve in terms of the market for other bakeries.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because even in the best in class thing that we're talking about, I don't keep tabs on what other bakeries are doing. Yeah. I think we used to, and I realised it was a bit of a trap, you know.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, like anything on social media, you look at something and you're like, oh,
why aren't we doing that?
Yeah, why aren't we doing that? Why can't we have that? And it's like the best answer is actually just don't look at it at all. Just look internally at the people you have, the creative minds they have, the ingredients you can pull from, the local kind of grains and things you can source. And I think that's what ends up making best in class. It's not about like looking outwardly for trends or anything like that. It's just do the best you can with what you've got and be consistent with it. And I think the result is best in class. But I don't think it's about a comparison thing.
Yeah.
And I think that as well, when I say best in class, it's also about the business as a whole. Like, I think organisationally we have a very good team culture, which has come through years of fine-tuning the way that we look for people and what we look for in them. And it builds a culture which ends up just creating so much inertia that all of it leads towards that thing which becomes best in class.
Yeah, I think that's critical what you said in terms of not comparing, in the sense of, you know, like everyone, I just think every human being on planet Earth is unique. We've all got a different way of seeing the world, and therefore if you lean into the way that you see things, and there's always a bit of like, it has to make economic sense, right? Like you can pick up clues from what other people are doing, but I do think that comparison is the fastest way to create dissatisfaction in yourself, and same thing with your business. I'm not particularly concerned what other coaches are doing, just because I have a different way of seeing the world, and some people like me, some people won't, some people like someone else, and there'll be the perfect offering for them, and that's cool. So I think that you know, one thing that I think you guys have done really, really well is been really clear about who you are. Like, you know who you are and what you do, and I give you so much stick about not putting bacon in your bagels. I still think that'd be better with. But anywho, you guys have a clear sense of who you are and what you do and don't do, and that is like, and I've said to both of you before, like some of the flavour combos that you come up with, I'm like, I would never put those two things together in my head. But you really know who you are.
Yeah.
As a business
Yeah.
and his people. But.
Yeah, and it's interesting because that, I think, for us has become a practiced behaviour where, part of it is being, idiosyncratic and willing to stay in that lane of being, being Grizzly. And, you talked before about, can we put bacon in a sandwich? Like we are a vegetarian bakery. And I think that
much to my chagrin.
The idiom applies, which is you can't be everything to everyone all the time.
Yeah.
And I think that's also what happens with comparison, when you start looking at what other people are doing and then you add that in, you just end up, there's a chance you dilute what you are. You dilute the personality. And I think that people tell us a lot, like, especially with regard to our social media, which, has a nice strong following, that, we've got such a great brand identity, a brand personality, but it's not something that, like, we ever sat down and designed. It just is a reflection of who we are.
Who you are.
Like, when Rach and Mike and the social team do shoots or videos or reels or whatever, those aren't ever really staged. It's just come in and shoot the people at work. Or that, even if it's shooting a product, we're not doing like the food styling magic of like a scoop of mashed potato for ice cream. We're not doing like, that's what it is.
Yeah.
We've had discussions internally before about like, I've shot this product for a post, but I didn't like the background. Is it right if I, cut it out in Photoshop and put a new background in? And my answer is no, it's not okay. Just shoot the food, and the background is the background because that's the wall in the bakery. Like, we're not going to add a layer of
pretense to kind of...
Yeah. Just like, I struggle with using these words sometimes because I think they get co-opted so easily, but authenticity is just shoot the sandwich and post it, like, because that's how it's going to look when someone eats it. So trying to, Photoshop it like it's a Cosmo magazine or something, like, it's just going to betray what actually happens when you have that product in real life. These are ultimately, they're all handcrafted by people, whether it's a bread, pastry, coffee, sandwich, anything. Those are all made by real people from scratch. And if you add on these layers of gloss, it kind of betrays them as well.
Yeah.
But all of that compounds, over a decade to creating what other people refer to as like a very strong brand identity. Yeah. But it's not something that, it wasn't.
How do you think of brand? What do you think brand is, and what role does that have for you guys?
So we said no hard questions.
I didn't say that.
What do I think brand is?
For you guys, not the
marketing
textbook definition of it, because no one cares about that anyway. Sorry.
So what do I think our brand is, or?
Yeah, like what role does your brand play for you?
I think, again, it's like, because it's just a reflection of what we're doing at any one time, the brand is just who the people are. So it doesn't matter what year it is, who's in the business at that time. You take a photo of something and it's a reflection of what's going on. And as long as we're okay with, as I said before, like, we're okay with just putting that out there, then that ends up building, that idiosyncratic kind of one of one brand where this is not made in a lab in terms of like the marketing. It's not like overwrought or anything like that. And it took us, I think, years to get to this point and realize it, but like, especially with something like social media where it's so tempting to do too much, that it just feels like if I see something in the plan for our social content, like I know what that's going to look and feel like, and it just has to feel right. And it's kind of a gut check thing with me in terms of what we would and wouldn't do for that kind of marketing content. But the brand for us is just, again, yeah, it's a reflection of who we are, which is it's craftspeople taking pride in their work. And we're a little bit gritty. We're a little bit weird. And I think that is, yeah, hopefully that's what people see.
Yeah, I think that's what people see. And I was just thinking about your Instagram content and the photos and how they have that overlay, which is slightly grainy. It's like, yeah, I just, as you said, gritty, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Visually as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just think, like you said to me once, that anyone can make a sourdough, but no one can make a Sydenham sourdough.
Yeah.
Or anyone can make a rye, but no one can make a midnight rye. Like only we can do that. And I think that's exactly right. It's like because you know who you are and you're just capturing that and presenting that to the world, that's who you come to not be known to be. And that is reflected in the places that you put your stores, that is reflected in the content that you put out there and the product that you put out there. But the product carries all of that. Like if you had a shitty product in those same places, no one would go there. But it's because it's good. Yeah. There's a certain irony in the fact that you're kind of casual with what you do because you're not at all casual with your product quality.
Yeah.
So it comes off as being kind of laid back and effortless, even though it's the exact opposite.
Yeah, that's true. And I think that how we get to there is thinking about stuff a lot. And like it's all about, the game isn't won on Sunday, the game is won Monday to Friday. So we think so much about products and names for products and, not just the flavors, but the presentation and every single part about it. We have some internal kind of values and codes that we use when we talk about products to kind of check where we are with it. And, is this the right idea? Should we keep pursuing this? But it's all practiced and it is all thought out so that then at the end of the day, it comes across as effortless. But there is a lot of thought. Yeah,
that's exactly what I was getting at. Is you don't accidentally build a business of 50 people, and out the back of a couple of dodgy looking shops. There's nothing accidental about it. And it, as you said, I was thinking about your story earlier and how you were saying some of those decisions, like even the decision to move back to Christchurch to do the bagels, they were quite almost impulsive, or they were certainly fast decisions. Yeah. And then there's also at the same time, there's this huge amount of thinking that goes on in the background, and there's a lot of consideration that goes into these decisions. So tell me a little bit about that, how you balance that fast action with the slow thinking, as to use Daniel Kahneman's phrase, thinking fast and slow.
Yeah. It's funny because I don't think of myself as an impulsive person. But deciding to move cities and start a business in sort of a 6-month span is quite quick. And especially bringing it to market that quickly as well. I think where I would be consistent over the years is just, as I said before, like thinking a lot about stuff, thinking very deeply, so that when certain things come to you or in front of you, you can make informed decisions. A great example would be the shop we've just opened on Cashel Street. We had in the plan to open a shop this year, but not as early as we did. We were looking at probably spring, summer. But we'd done the work in terms of where we wanted to be looking, what sort of clientele we wanted to target, and the offering that we would present there. And the location, we found out, it used to have a cafe in there for about 8 years, and we always loved that location. Great part of the city, just between Bridge of Remembrance and the Gardens, and north facing, beautiful, floor to ceiling glass. When it was available, it was like, okay, well let's go and have a look, and let's do the nitty gritty of due diligence and talking with the developers and all that kind of thing, and see if it's going to work for us. So, we're probably open 6 to 9 months ahead of schedule. And where it stretched us was more on the probably financial side, in terms of having to get lending ahead of schedule to open that. But the mental preparation had been done in terms of what that shop needed to be, so that when we saw it, it was like, okay, great, let's just go, rather than working the backwards way around, which would be, I think, especially with property is such a, whether it's residential or commercial, getting really emotionally invested in something and then trying to think, could a shop work here? But you're already clouded by the fact that you love the space. You might end up making the wrong decision. Whereas we had a pretty narrow band of parameters for what that location needed to be, and then the one that turned up fit those parameters. So it might seem impulsive to open a shop that quickly, but it's just that it was ahead of schedule in the plan, not that it was a big shiny thing to go and swoop down on.
I think that just to pick up on what you said there, so often when we're making decisions, we don't have a list of criteria, and when we're hiring that staff member, what do you actually want in them? Yeah, we know you can write the job ad, but what do you actually want in that person? And what don't you want is equally as powerful. Or when you're looking to make a decision about a direction, well, how would you know if it was the right direction and if it was the wrong direction? And I think, like, as you said, having that criteria there then means you can make the decision either way without the emotion, the rush of the emotion driving that decision, which is oftentimes not a great decision when it comes to business.
Yeah, for sure. And especially with that period of due diligence, lawyers looking at contracts and stuff like that, actively making sure I'm not like dreaming the space up, because it doesn't exist until the contract is written.
Yeah.
But if you've already dreamed the space,
Yes,
and then hold on, the negotiations aren't going where you wanted, but you've dreamed the space, you might end up going through with something that was not a good idea.
Yeah, that's good. What, just on the thinking topic, what have been some of the big thinking shifts for you in this journey?
I think that, the biggest thing is, the common story of the second that we started to pull ourselves away from working on the floor exclusively and started to work on the business, not just in it, which obviously you were a huge help with that, and that mindset shift. I think the realization of, I remember when, I think you told me I had to read the E-Myth. And I read that and I was just like, I can't believe someone can write something so accurately about someone they don't know.
Yeah.
That was just like, well, okay, here we go.
Yeah.
There's other stuff here. And that certainly helped with just that self-realization of what I was doing, you know, that working that much, but you're just like, you're in like one of those big Zorb balls on a paddling pool where you're running really fast.
Yeah.
But you're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
You know? And that realization kind of just was a huge catalyst. And I think also at that time started taking in a lot of other information, you know, through books and podcasts and obviously through coaching, just to try and create the different kind of headspace that you need to take on different parts of the business, you know, different identities for certain things, wearing different hats as you need to.
Yeah, I think that's critical, isn't it? Like moving. I'm a big believer that your environment will create your thinking, and your thinking creates your results. So if you change that environment, and that might be, I love the fact that in a book is somebody's wisdom distilled. There's years and years and years of expertise distilled that you can absorb in a matter of hours, you typically, and then put that into play in your business. And similarly with people, right? Like, and I know this is something that you've got still in your environment now and still invest in terms of, you know, training for your team, and you work with Noel at Oxygenate, and so it's not just limited to this period of my life. I had this. It's like you're pulling what you need for the different seasons that you're in.
Yeah, and it's that willingness to admit that you don't know, and that sometimes like the shortcut is bringing in someone who does over learning how to do that yourself. You know, because I'm sure you could learn if you want to. You could learn whatever within reason. You know, in terms of different aspects of the business. But should you? Is that a good use of your time? Is that using your strengths to their highest degree? Like often, I think that's not the case. You're good at what you're good at, and should really try and lean into that and create the expertise that are unique to yourself.
Yeah, that's really good. And I think if you're smart and you're a kind of give it a go person, which oftentimes entrepreneurs are in particular, they're pretty switched on and they'll give stuff a go. Plus, we live in a country where you do just, this part of our ethos as a country is like, just give it a crack, mate. Like, have a go.
Certainly, and sometimes, and I'd say this is with myself, like, give it a crack despite everything telling you that it's maybe not a good idea, you know. But let's see what you can get out of it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, exactly. And I think oftentimes we give stuff a crack that it's the wrong stuff. Like it's one thing to be give it a crack, but make sure it's the right,
for sure,
the right task to start off with.
Yeah, and also know when to stop. You know, like it's a little bit of a kill your darlings thing. You know, certainly I could speak to that about some of our products. Like we can conceive of a product, start testing it, get to a point where we're like second, third draft, and then you've just got to sometimes be okay with saying, this isn't working. Let's just stop. Because it's never going to be what you thought it could be. But that's also hard to do, to just pull the pin on people's time and effort. And it's a hard lesson to kind of learn. That, you know, this thing isn't quite there. Either go back to the drawing board or let's just can it.
Yeah, that sunk cost fallacy, right? Like once you've committed to going down the path and you think, well, I've come so far, I can't abort mission here.
For sure, but like, and that's a hard thing to learn. Definitely, we've definitely made a couple of those decisions that we sort of kept going when we maybe should have stopped. But then, eventually we figure it out how to make it win for us. But yeah, that's hard once you got that momentum to pull the pin.
So what does the future hold for you guys? Like, what's next for Grizzly that you can tell us about publicly? Like, world domination? I'm joking. And like, how do you balance that commitment to quality and the desire to grow and have more people? Because I know we've talked about it before. You one of your little what do we call it? A ditty, spreading the gospel of good bread. It's that's when you do good work, you want to share it with other people.
Yeah.
So how do you balance that when you think about the future?
Yeah, because it's a good question. I think where we're heading to next, it's growth, but it's more about maturity than, say, the number of people. And it's also, we're trying to chase down the idea of having more influence over our supply chain. So, looking at over the next decade, vertically integrating some components of the bakery process, and having an understanding of what, say, fruits and veggies are ready when, and having an influence over what those can be as well. We're undergoing a kind of a process internally that's kind of, we ripped up our old kind of seasonal product calendar, and we've written a new one which is really trying to fall more in line with true seasonality. We use some intermediary suppliers who basically distribute, fruit and veg and things like that. And yeah, you can have carrots in stock, or you can have kale in stock, and then suddenly it's not in stock, and you don't know, it's not clear why when you use those platforms exclusively. Whereas if we take that relationship to the actual farmer, producer, and we can learn more about what's actually coming and how much we need of it, it kind of takes a different path. So, if we can go to a farmer and say, hey, look, we used 700 kilograms of lemons last year to make lemon curd donuts. What can you do for us? Can we get a better tasting lemon, an organic lemon, and can we skip the middleman distribution, and so that the farmer's getting a good price and we're getting a better product? Then it's a win-win for both. And I think the same thing is going to happen for us when it comes to grains. Canterbury is truly the breadbasket of New Zealand in terms of grain production. The grain industry and milling industry here is pretty wonky. It's probably another podcast in and of itself. New Zealand grows plenty. It grows enough grain to make all the bread and baked products that we need to feed the people here. But the vast majority of grain is grown for livestock. So it comes out of a system where there was belief in the early 20th century that New Zealand didn't grow good grain for milling. And so we just we stopped doing it properly. It's now we import, like the whole North Island is basically on Australian wheat.
Wow.
More or less. It's all imported in through the big mills, and then, it's not even New Zealand grain.
That's mental, isn't it?
Especially we're talking the non-artisan stuff, which is, 95% of what gets consumed is Aussie grain. So there's some economic reasons why that's the case, and fortunately we live in Canterbury where we can grow all of it. So again, it's about building relationships with farmers to get better results for both parties. Arable farmers are driven by yield, getting the most they can out of the land every season. And they tend to only have 4 harvests a year. Very risky business to be in. But if we can say to a farmer, we're using 150 tonnes of flour, grow us a portion of that, of a specific, maybe it's a specific variety that's not going into the, homogenised flour mill. Grow us a specific variety, and we'll pay for it, we'll pay for it per hectare, which matches up with what you would have got if you had a high yield product. That's always the concern. If I grow a lower yield product, my land's not worth as much. Well, if we can bridge that gap, knowing that we're an artisan bakery, we have more wiggle room with what a loaf of bread can cost than, say, the supermarket. Then it serves both parties well. It makes the farmers have more of a connection through to where it's actually going, and then it also gives us an element of control over the supply chain and the quality as well. At our hearts, I'm certainly a bit of a control freak. So that idea of if we could contract,
controlling both ends,
it's great.
Yeah, and like you said, if it results in then a superior product for the customer and a better deal for the farmer as well, plus you guys get to work with the product, which is more consistent. And I mean, even from a niching perspective, like if you can create a paddock of wheat that only you have access to, in the first instance that creates a bit of an opportunity around premium pricing, but I'm guessing that you're thinking beyond that and you're thinking industry impact. Yeah,
and we're in the sort of the artisan end of the bread industry is a very funny one because it's extremely fractured. So we are many small voices, and any one bakery's flour purchasing is a drop in the ocean compared to, say, foodstuffs. In terms of how much flour they need for their PAMs or whatever it is. So our voice is very small because it's so fractured. But combined, we are a decent percentage of
the market.
Of the market. So it's about, I guess, either trying to pull that voice together or taking very...
was that a public call out to all the other bakeries? Sam's just volunteered to create a co-op. That's what
I mean, geez, why not? It's a really tricky one because this is another discussion. The milling industry, don't get me started. But overall, that idea of more control and really more influence over the supply chain. New Zealand has a very homogenised produce market. You go to the supermarkets in New Zealand versus Australia or the States or whatever, like the breadth of product you can get, fresh fruit and veggie.
Amazing.
Nothing, There's like one carrot you can buy here,
It's bizarre. Well, I can hear your voices going, which seems to be, I don't know if I have that effect on people. Maybe it's just because we talk for ages. So
I have another sip.
I did want to finish with, I know there's every now and again I run into someone who hasn't tried Grizzly Baked Goods, and so it would be wrong to finish without telling them a little short message of why they should try you and what they should try when they do turn up.
Oh, all right. Pitch. Yeah. I think that where we sit out on our own in the industry is that every single one of those products that you can get is like an absolute banger. And what I see a lot of people doing is they have their sort of 3 or 4 favourites and you'll rotate through, but then every now and then we'll chuck something new at you that will just grab you, and then you have to have this internal conversation about what of that routine that you had are you now going to have to jettison to incorporate the new flavour.
Yes.
And I think that when you try us, will become part of your life. and this started very much as a family business with myself and Sara, and we still treat it as a family business. And to a degree, every customer is part of that family. When they come into a shop, they're coming into our home. So we've got the variety to please almost everyone, and enough there that's going to hook you and keep you. And then there are those other intangibles that we've talked about earlier in terms of, let's say, the brand, that are just going to create a sensation of you feeling welcome. I barely even talked about food. It was more about very esoteric, wasn't it? But that's kind of it. You won't really understand what's going on when you're there, and you'll be putting, I think Buchan Street Shop is a great example of, and it's something that I remember you said to us years ago, Marcus, that there's this synergy between the high and the low, that we have this shop in the back streets of Sydenham that is this, industrial building from the 70s. We're serving you out of a window, and you're getting it in a brown paper bag, and it might be the best croissant you've ever had.
Yeah.
And it just does a little bit of a magic trick on you.
Yeah. That's a great pitch, Sam. It's a hell of a pitch. I think, what's that almond biscuit that I tried recently?
The Ricky Rally.
The Ricky Rally. That's why I knew I was going to say it was an Italian almond biscuit. But I tried that on, and there's always, anytime you order food, you're always nervous about, if I try this, what if it's terrible?
Sure,
and that's why people go to an Indian restaurant and always order butter chicken, because they just, what if I try something else and I don't like it? I don't have that same problem when it comes to trying food, but I know a lot of people who do. And anyway, so I was at the window and I was looking at the options, and I saw that Ricky Rally, and I was like, what is that? I felt a little bit embarrassed saying it because I didn't know how to pronounce it, and I asked the person serving me what it was, and she said it's an Italian biscuit. It's got almond flour and lemon zest and whatever else in it, almond meal. And I sort of thought, that can't be that great. Like, surely, I almost felt bad asking her what it was, because I felt like I couldn't backtrack and order something else. And I ordered it, and I had this, and it looked like, from the outside, it looked like a glamorous version of a homemade ginger nut. I was like, this could be dry and crunchy, and maybe I'll just have purchases regret instantly. But I tried it, and I was like, this thing might be the best biscuit that I've ever had, and I would know in no way, shape or form, if you told me the best biscuit you'll ever eat will be a Ricky Rally, I would have been like, doubt it, mate. Like, it's got to be something covered in chocolate with marshmallows in it or something. I don't know. But honestly, it was just like, as you said, it was an absolute banger, completely unsuspecting, crunchy on the outside, super soft and buttery, just the right amount of acid and fat and sugar and sweetness. And I think that comes back to what you said around, like, everything that we do is well thought out, and before it hits your lips, it's gone through this.
Yeah, I think, you have to always remember that someone is coming and parting with their hard-earned money.
Yeah.
That I need to, I take pride in the fact that whatever amount of, your wallet you empty with us, that it's going to be good, that we're not going to put up anything that's substandard, because as well as you parting with that hard-earned money, like, eating food is, pretty damn intimate act. So there's an exchange here between, something we've crafted with our hands that then goes into your hands, that goes to your mouth. Mm-hmm. So people put a lot of trust in that. We're only talking, might be $5 for a croissant or whatever, but, like, again, it doesn't matter what the cost of it is. It doesn't matter the size of the product that you're eating. Like, we have to have put all of our hard work into it, we have to do it every single day because that is someone's lunch, and they have an expectation that it's going to be good because it was good yesterday. So we just have to keep up with our own high expectations.
Yeah, just once worked with a restaurant owner, well-established restaurant that's been in Christchurch for a while, and she said one of the reasons they've been successful is that they treat every person like it's their birthday, like they're coming in for their birthday, and that feeling of I'm spending my money, I want it to be an occasion, I want it to be a celebration, I want it to be memorable for all the right reasons. And if you serve people with that mindset, then it's hard for them to have a bad experience. But that is something that I think is common in great companies, is they create a culture where, as you said, that there is that high value on the person who is coming into your business and exchanging their money for your goods or services. And so, yeah, well done on that. You've certainly nailed that. So what should they try? I think that is the next big question is,
All right.
No, we know that nothing's going to be bad.
Yeah.
Nothing's going to be average. Everything is great.
Right. Well, I'll speak to what some of my favourites are.
Yeah, let's do that.
You're not supposed to have a favourite child, but when it comes to baked goods, certainly I do. If you're after a sandwich, the eggy breakfast. It's
Great.
It's the
Great recommendation.
don't know how to explain it. It's an egg souffle with a lot of savoury, spicy things going on inside a bagel, and it just works, man. Like, again, that was something that Sara and I had fine-tuned at home, and then we turned it into a product to sell. But eggy breakfast, then a cheese mite scroll. There seems to be quite a wide swath of firefighters who come to our shops every day.
Cheesy mite scroll.
And they kind of just all get cheese mite scrolls.
That's so funny.
Yeah, we'll see like multiple appliances at each shop every day.
I'm guessing they're not going on the fireman's calendar that year.
Oh, jeez, I didn't say that. Yeah, so cheese mite scroll I think is a killer. I would say a cheesecake donut.
Yeah.
If you go in the sweet end of things, love the cheesecake donut. And I mean, my favourite loaf of bread is the country sourdough. Yeah, I'm going to limit it to 4. I'm sure you wanted me to just pick one, but I picked 4.
No, I think.
But if you grab that as a combo, your breakfast is your eggy breakfast, then you got your cheese mite for lunch. Make a sandwich for dinner, or grilled cheese and tomato soup, and then dessert is your donut. And then I think we've done the job of making sure that we're part of your entire day. Yeah. And
I like what you said to me once, that once you've tried it, you will become a bread snob. And I kind of laughed that off, but it's 100% true.
Yeah.
You do, once you've tried the upper end of anything, it's hard to go back.
Totally.
So
yeah.
I would second that. And I think if you're looking for a morning tea option, it's hard to beat the coffee pecan morning bun.
There we go.
That's that would be my 10 cents. Well, Sam, we've been around the world. We've managed to stay out of a couple of topics we'll save for episode 2 or part 2, but it was fun. So thank you
very much.